It is a tale as old as time in the American firearms community. A new shooter walks into their local dealer looking for a reliable home defense setup. Inevitably, the guy behind the glass counter slides a heavy .45 ACP or a massive .44 Magnum across the mat. He gives that knowing nod and promises that a single hit from this hand cannon will instantly end any fight. It plays perfectly into our action movie fantasies. It appeals to our sense of rugged independence. But frankly, pushing that narrative to a beginner is borderline negligent. I have spent countless hours analyzing ballistic gel tests and reviewing post-incident medical reports. The raw diameter of the projectile is almost never the metric that dictates who walks away from a gunfight. A veteran law enforcement officer I deeply respect once shared a grim reality with me over a cup of diner coffee. He carried a big-bore sidearm for his entire early career. That changed the night he watched his partner put 3 solid hits of full metal jacket right into the thoracic cavity of an armed suspect. The attacker completely absorbed the impacts without breaking stride. He kept aggressively pushing forward. That terrifying incident proved that a massive bullet failing to reach vital organs is completely useless. The FBI learned this exact lesson through tragedy and extensive research. Stopping a threat isn't about the cinematic concussive thump. It is entirely about your mechanical ability to manage recoil, track your sights, and deliver multiple accurate shots before the attacker can return fire. And that brings us to the absolute holy grail of terminal ballistics: penetration depth. The catalyst for the modern FBI protocol. Anyone who studies the history of armed conflict knows this specific date by heart: April 11th, 1986, the infamous Miami shootout. This single event completely restructured how the world views law enforcement ammunition. A team of 8 FBI agents found themselves in a desperate gun battle against 2 heavily armed bank robbers. What unfolded was 5 minutes of pure, unadulterated chaos. More than 140 rounds were exchanged on that suburban street. Tragically, 2 brave agents made the ultimate sacrifice that day. But the ballistic autopsy revealed a haunting truth. Very early in the firefight, one of the primary suspects took a direct center mass hit from a 9mm sidearm. By all training standards, it was a perfectly placed shot. The projectile passed through the suspect's arm and entered the chest, but it ran out of kinetic energy right before it reached the heart. Because that single round lacked the momentum to penetrate just a fraction of an inch deeper, the suspect was able to continue his murderous rampage. That catastrophic failure forced the FBI to completely reevaluate their entire ammunition philosophy. They stopped asking about the raw width of the bullet. They started asking whether a specific load could smash through a defensive arm, punch through heavy winter clothing, or defeat a car windshield, and still reach the vital organs. That exact question birthed the standardized FBI ballistic protocol we rely on today. To be approved for duty use, a defensive round must achieve a minimum of 12 inches of penetration in calibrated ordnance gelatin. If a bullet stops at 11.9 inches, it gets entirely disqualified from duty carry. The science behind the 12-inch standard. So, why is the standard explicitly set between 12 and 18 inches? Why not cap it at 10 or push it out to 20? The answer is rooted entirely in human anatomy and 3-dimensional geometry. When you are forced to defend your life, the attacker is never going to stand perfectly square like a cardboard target on a flat range. They will be moving dynamically. They might have their arms extended, actively pointing a weapon at you. They might be bladed aggressively at an angle. They could be layered up in a dense winter work jacket over a thick fleece. Your chosen defensive round must have the mechanical integrity to chew through heavy denim, shatter bone, tear through muscle tissue, and still retain enough velocity to sever the central nervous system. If your bullet aggressively fragments and stops at 6 inches, you have only created a nasty surface wound. You have not neutralized the immediate threat to your life. Conversely, if your ammunition completely ignores resistance and punches through 22 inches of tissue, you have a massive overpenetration problem. You are legally and morally responsible for whatever that bullet strikes after it exits the bad guy. I recently ran my own independent gel tests to verify this concept. I fired 2 completely different 9mm loads through the same barrel. The generic discount bin hollow points from a local sporting goods store clogged with clothing and halted at a shallow 9 inches. Then I ran the premium Spear Gold Dot. It reliably punched straight to the 14-inch mark, peeling back into a perfect, uniform expansion. Both rounds cycled the action, but only one of them is actually engineered to save your life in a dynamic struggle. The legal weight of your ammunition choice. Just the other day, I was running drills at my local outdoor range. I noticed a guy a few bays over happily stuffing his concealed carry magazines with cheap, round-nose, full metal jacket target loads. When I politely struck up a conversation, he confidently told me that ball ammo just feeds more reliably in his gun. I cringed internally, knowing he was unknowingly setting the stage for a catastrophic legal nightmare. Let's break down the mechanics here. Full metal jacket ammunition features a solid lead core completely encased in a hard copper shell. It is specifically engineered to retain its shape and punch cleanly through barriers. It is absolutely perfect for ringing steel plates or poking holes in paper. It is an absolute disaster for civilian self-defense. Modern jacketed hollow points are specifically engineered to expand aggressively the microsecond they encounter fluid-heavy tissue. This expansion creates immediate drag, dumping 100% of the kinetic energy directly into the threat while acting as a parachute to prevent an exit wound. Back in 2009, a business owner in Georgia drew his weapon during a violent robbery. He fired a standard ball round at the attacker. The ammunition functioned exactly as its physical design dictated. It completely passed through the criminal's torso, punched through the drywall behind him, and critically wounded a completely innocent person in the next room. That is the ultimate nightmare for any concealed carrier. You have an invisible, unbreakable leash attached to every single projectile that leaves your muzzle. Do not skimp on your defensive loadout. Invest in a proven hollow point that is scientifically designed to stop inside the intended target. The evolution beyond legacy calibers. If you rewind the clock a couple of decades, the .40 Smith & Wesson was the undisputed heavyweight champion of the law enforcement world. It was everywhere. But if you look inside the duty holsters of federal agents and municipal tactical teams today, the landscape has completely shifted. They have almost universally transitioned back to the 9mm platform. The reason is purely technological. Advances in modern smokeless powder and sophisticated projectile design have completely leveled the playing field. A modern 9mm defensive load expands and penetrates with the exact same terminal effectiveness as the heavier, slower calibers of the past. By dropping down in caliber size, you immediately gain 2 massive tactical advantages. First, you drastically increase your onboard capacity. A standard duty-sized polymer frame gives you significantly more trigger pulls than a traditional 1911 before you are forced to perform a slide-lock reload. Second, and more importantly, is your shootability. Managing a lighter recoil impulse means you can easily stack 3 rapid, accurate hits into the center mass in the exact same time it takes a heavy-caliber shooter to recover and fire twice. When you stack up premium defensive loads like Federal HST or Hornady Critical Duty, the old ballistic disparity completely vanishes. Carrying a 9mm is no longer viewed as settling for less. It is widely recognized as the most efficient, tactically sound solution available. The cutting edge of projectile technology. Now, let's step away from traditional lead for a minute and look at the bleeding edge of the industry. There is a completely new class of defensive ammunition that throws the concept of expansion right out the window. Innovative companies are machining solid copper projectiles with aggressive radial flutes. If you look at the nose of the bullet, it resembles the tip of a Phillips head screwdriver. These rounds do not mushroom upon impact. Instead, they rely entirely on the principles of high-speed fluid dynamics. As that solid copper bullet violently spins through soft tissue, those deep flutes act like a turbine. They mechanically force biological fluid outward at staggering velocities. This creates a devastatingly massive temporary wound channel without the bullet ever needing to deform. For anyone relying on deep concealment pocket pistols, this technology is an absolute game changer. Historically, if you carried a micro-compact 380 ACP or a classic pocket gun, standard hollow points were notoriously unreliable. They simply lacked the muzzle velocity required to force the jacket open, acting just like ball ammo. These modern fluted designs completely bypass that velocity requirement. They guarantee deep, vital-reaching penetration while causing massive trauma through hydraulic displacement. It honestly feels like science fiction, but it is proving its worth in the real world. Anatomy always beats ballistics. I will never forget the wisdom of a grizzled old combat instructor who pulled me aside during a grueling training block. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "I would much rather take a clean miss from a .44 Magnum than catch a .22 long rifle right between the eyes." His logic is absolutely bulletproof. As a community, we obsess endlessly over ballistic charts and muzzle energy, while completely ignoring basic human anatomy. If you want to instantly shut down a lethal threat, you have to disconnect their computer. That requires precise targeting of the central nervous system. We are talking about the brainstem or the upper cervical spine. The only other biological way to force a rapid cessation of hostilities is through catastrophic blood pressure loss, which means destroying the heart or the ascending aorta. Putting a massive chunk of lead through a suspect's bicep is just going to make them angry. Placing a well-engineered projectile directly into the cardiac box will instantly end the fight. The FBI's data collection paints a very clear picture here. Compared to intermediate rifle cartridges, all pistol calibers are remarkably bad at stopping human beings. Therefore, if a handgun is the only tool you have available, you must be capable of delivering surgical accuracy under duress. Shot placement is never optional. It is the only thing that actually matters. Matching the gun to the shooter. I clearly remember my first experience behind the trigger of a snub-nosed .357 Magnum revolver. Touching off that first round felt exactly like holding a lit stick of dynamite. The concussion rattled my teeth. My ears were instantly ringing through my protection, and the blinding muzzle flash completely washed out my sight picture. The range safety officer just smirked, tapped his timer, and told me to run it again, faster. I physically couldn't do it. My grip was compromised, and I was anticipating the recoil before my finger even touched the trigger shoe. A few years later, I was coaching a single mother who had just purchased her first firearm. Some smooth-talking salesman had convinced her to buy a snappy, subcompact .40 Smith & Wesson because she supposedly needed maximum stopping power. The poor woman was absolutely terrified of her own weapon. She was heavily flinching and pulling all her shots down into the dirt. We took a step back and transitioned her onto a soft-shooting, single-stack 9mm. Within a single magazine, her confidence skyrocketed, and she was punching out the center ring of the target. The absolute best everyday carry gun for you is the most powerful caliber that you can repeatedly and accurately fire at combat speed. If you cannot manage the recoil impulse, you aren't defending yourself. You are just turning money into loud noises. The courtroom aftermath of your gear. There is a dark reality to civilian self-defense that rarely gets discussed over the gun store counter. The vicious legal battle that follows the shooting. If you are ever forced to draw your weapon and end a life, every single piece of gear on your body becomes state's evidence. An ambitious district attorney is absolutely going to scrutinize the specific ammunition you chose to load into your magazines. If they log your evidence and find novelty rounds with aggressive names or heavily marketed gimmicks like the radically invasive projectile, you are practically writing the prosecutor's opening statement for them. They will stand before a jury and paint you as a bloodthirsty vigilante who was actively hunting for an excuse to pull the trigger. Do yourself a massive favor and stick to the boring, professional, duty-grade ammunition. Find out what your local law enforcement agencies are carrying and mirror their loadout. Stack your magazines with Speer Gold Dot. Rely on Federal HST. Carry the Winchester Ranger T series. If you ever find yourself sitting in the defendant's chair, you want your attorney to clearly state that you chose this specific ammunition purely because it is the trusted, proven standard for law enforcement safety and minimizing collateral damage. You absolutely do not want to be caught admitting you bought your defensive rounds because the skull graphic on the cardboard box looked cool. The final verdict on hardware versus software. I was recently observing a high-level tactical pistol course. One of the students showed up running a spectacular $3,000 custom 2011 race gun. He had a top-tier enclosed emitter optic, a blinding weapon light, and a chest rig stuffed with the most expensive match-grade ammunition money could buy. But when the shot timer beeped, he completely botched his draw stroke, snagged his garment, and threw his first shot completely off the paper. Right in the very next lane stood a guy running a bone-stock, holster-worn compact polymer pistol. He cleanly cleared his cover garment, pressed out, and hammered the target with mechanical consistency, every single time. It is incredibly fun to debate hardware, compare specs, and argue about calibers. But at the end of the day, it is your internal software that will keep you breathing. You can max out your credit cards on the finest ballistic technology on the planet, but those bullets do not possess a guidance system. You have to put in the agonizing hours to forge those neural pathways. You need thousands of flawless dry-fire repetitions. You need to obsessively practice your draw stroke from concealment. You must be able to instinctively clear a double feed in total darkness. That relentless dedication is the only real secret to surviving violence. So, don't fall into the trap of buying a premium box of defensive hollow points and assuming you have purchased a protective force field. Pack your range bag, get out to the flat range, put in the grueling, unglamorous work. Because when the unimaginable happens and the balloon finally goes up, you are not going to magically rise to the occasion. You are going to violently default to the lowest level of your mastered training. That is going to wrap up today's comprehensive deep dive into the realities of defensive ballistics and ammunition selection. If you found value in this breakdown and learned something that makes you a more capable defender, do me a favor and aggressively smash that like button. It is the absolute best way to help us defeat the algorithm and get this vital information to more responsible citizens. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our upcoming masterclass, where we meticulously break down the absolute best concealed carry holsters on the market. Jump down into the comments right now and let me know, what specific duty load are you currently trusting your life to in your everyday carry setup? Are you fiercely loyal to Team 9mm, or are you still holding down the fort for the heavy hitters? Stay violently prepared, train aggressively, and I will see you out on the range.